had x plus 4 times 2x minus 3. And if you did your double distributive, this you got 2x squared minus 3x plus 8x minus 12. And then you combine like terms. So if you got 2x squared plus 5x minus 12, you are correct. What we're going to do today is we're going to work backwards from this trinomial and go back into the factors that get that trinomial. So using the grouping method, in order for us to be successful, we need to be able to factor out the GCF if possible, then group the terms with parentheses, factor out the GCF, rewrite the polynomial expressions, and then factor out the GCF again. Now, some of us need a little refresher on what terms are. So that's what we're going to go over first. Let's say we had 4 plus 8 plus 12. Here we have 1, 2, 3 terms. This term, we get it by multiplying 2 times 2. 8, we get 2 times 4, and 12 is 2 times 6. Now, if we want to factor out the greatest factor, notice how all of them have a 2. You don't have to write this down. This is just to refresh your memory. When we're taking out the greatest common factor, or the GCF, that's what we're doing. We're seeing which one they have in common. So in this case, we take out the 2, and then remaining we have 2 plus 4 plus 6. Does everybody see that? Yes, no? This is very basic. Don't get confused with this. You don't have to write this down. I'm just showing you what a factor is. So the factors of 4 are 2 and 2. Factors of 8 are 2 and 4. Factors of 12 are 2 and 6. And if we take out the greatest common factor, it's 2. And whatever we have left over stays in here. Now I'm going to go a step further. What if we had 2x squared plus 3x cubed plus 5x? Now this means we have 2 times x, right? This one, we have 3 times x times x times x. And this one is simply 5 times x. Here we still have 3 terms. 1, 2, 3. To get the greatest common factor, we first look at the numbers, and the biggest GCF here is 1. Then we look here. This one has 2, this one has 3, this one has 1, but they all have at least one x in common. Right? So now, what we end up with, if we cross off this x and this x and this x, whatever's left over is what's inside the parentheses. This is 3x. Notice how we have 2 here. And then this is 5. We're just taking out the greatest common factor. We look at the 2, the 3, and the 5. The greatest common factor is 1. This is 2 times 1, 3 times 1, 5 times 1. They all have 1 in common. That's why I'm only able to have 1 outside. They all have at least one x. So I'm going to factor that one out. We're kind of dividing it. We have 1x here, 2x is left over here, and no x is left over there. So again, if we go backwards or go forwards, we get 2x squared plus 3x to the third plus 5x, which is exactly what we had in the beginning. Does everybody see that? Okay. Now for this last example, this is one that you may want to write down because this is the first time you see it. We've got x squared, x minus 3, plus 2x times x minus 3, plus 3 times x minus 3. Although this looks like it has more than 3 terms, there are only 3 terms. Oopsie. This is one term, this is one term, and this is one term. Now, if we look at all those 3 terms, what is the greatest common factor of each one? What do they all have in common? They're being multiplied. That's why we can say that's only 3 terms. What do they all have in common? ¿Qué tienen todos en común? X menos qué? Yeah, so this one has x minus 3. This one has x minus 3. And this one has x minus 3. So then we can factor out x minus 3. So if we factor it out, then this cancels all these 3. And whatever's left over is whatever's left over is going to be part of my second factor. So we've got x squared plus 2x plus 3. Our success criteria says we're going to factor out the GCF if possible first. So before we do anything, we're going to now do 3, 9, 4, or 12 have a GCF? No, not even the x's, right? So in that case, my step number 2 is going to be group terms with parentheses. So I'm just going to rewrite it. And I'm going to group 2 terms at one time. So I'm going to group these terms together. I'm going to skip that plus sign that combines them. I'm just going to bring it down. And I'm going to group these terms together. Questions so far? All right. Our next step is going to be to factor again. Factor GCF from each group. Make sure you remember to do the number first or do the coefficient first. Then the variable. I'm going to rewrite this again. Maybe I should put it on this side. What is my GCF? Let's look at the 3 and the 9 first. What's the greatest common factor with 3 and 9? 3. Now we're going to look at the variables. What's the greatest common factor between these two? X to the second power or x to the third power? X to the second power, right? This one has 3 and this one has 2. So they only have 2 in common. So we're going to take out x squared. When we factor, we're basically dividing each term by what we factored it out of. So in this case, it's like dividing by 3x squared divided by 3x squared. So we first look at 3x cubed divided by 3x squared is x. And then on my second term, 9x squared divided by 3x squared is positive 3. Any questions so far? Now we're going to do the exact same thing to the second group, but we want to bring down this plus sign first. Now, if we look at these 2 terms, what's my GCF? We look at the numbers first. What's the GCF between 4 and 12? 4. And if we look at the x's, this one has an x, this one doesn't have an x, so we can't factor an x out. So in this case, we're going to divide each term by +4. So we divide this by +4, divide this by +4. 4x divided by 4 gives us x, and 12 divided by 4 gives us a +3. Any questions so far? All right, so now we're gonna factor out the GCF again. Now, if we look at these two terms, remember it's only two terms, what factor do they have in common? Perfect, x plus 3. So they both have x plus 3 here, x plus 3 here, so we're going to factor it out, x plus 3. We're going to cancel that one, and we have left over 3x squared plus 4. And that's it. Any questions? So if you need an extra piece of notes, this is what they have in common. And then this is the terms that are left over. And then the very last step, actually, I said it wasn't the last step, but the very last step is that we want to factor again if needed. Now, the reason I put it at the end to factor again is because sometimes we forget the very first step to factor. So if we forget to factor for the very first step, we can catch it on the last step. Any questions? All right, go to your Pear Deck. All right, so for the first step on your Pear Deck, you're going to group your terms with parentheses. And again, it's basically you're dividing each term by your GCF. So divided by 3x cubed, divided by 3x cubed. And we get x plus 3. Now let's look at the second group. Bring down that plus sign. GCF between 4x and 12 is 4. We want to divide each one by a +4. And 4x divided by 4 is just x. 12 divided by 4 is a +3. Now you can tell if you're on the right track if these come out exactly the same. If they don't come out the same, then you might have done some mistake in your math. Go back and check it. All right, so then now my last step is to take out the GCF. What is my GCF between these two terms? Perfect, x plus 3. And once we factor them out, whatever we have left over is going to be my second factor. Any questions? All right, let's go ahead and go to factor by using the difference and sum of cubes. Now the cool thing